CTV continues its coverage of St. Lucia's 40th independence anniversary, now in a sit-down with Mr. Peter Josie, one of the surviving St. Lucian delegates to negotiate the island's independence from Britain. Hello and welcome. My name is Jessy, Leonce, and you are watching The Reality Show on CTV. Welcome, Mr. Josie. To begin, let us look at the pace of development since independence. Referring to your commentary this past weekend in the Star newspaper, you essentially label our independence as an ongoing effort. In 40 years, what do you perceive to be outstanding achievements for this time frame, and also in what areas do you think we've been lagging so far?
Before I answer, let me just say Evans Cauldron, who is still alive, was with us, with Alan, Lucia and myself, on one round of Constitutional Conference talks. We had 3 separate rounds of talks. I went to the first, second and third. Only Alan, Lucia and I, Sir Alan, Lucia and I, attended all 3 talks. But Evans Cauldron, I want to make that correction, was there, and Evans is still alive. We have done some good things since independence. I believe we're still lacking a lot. And the main thing that I thought would have happened by now, and I want to get that off my chest very early, is that when a government, a progressive government, had come into office, a government that was thinking ahead, it would have looked at the Constitution, which we, and I say we, I was a Labour Party person at the time, a member of the Labour Party, had criticized a lot in certain parts. A new government with some experience under its belt, especially in constitutional law, etc., with sympathy towards the Labour Party, would have changed the Constitution, modified it, corrected it, however you want to call it, and put a new Constitution in place by now. So that in the 40th, as we begin our 40th year of that journey, we would be actually approaching a new road. And I was excited by the theme All In, because it spoke to what we were trying to say 40 years ago. And I'm happy to sit with you to explain what we were trying to say at the time, because some people pretend that all they saw was the radical Peter Josie, the radical George Odlum, the radical this and radical that. But behind all of that, there was deep thought, and I want to share some of this with you this morning or today.
Okay. You mentioned that the Labour government at the time would have been able to bring that to fruition. There are other countries, for instance, Grenada, who still struggle with the whole idea of constitutional revamping. Do you think it is perhaps there's more to it, more to it that is preventing us from achieving this constitutional reform?
In St. Lucia, I would say no, because the people were totally with the Labour Party 20 years ago, 22 years ago. There was a 16-1 majority.
Landslide.
After that, that is more than a landslide. After that, there was a 13-4, I think. And again, the people, the independence thing and what we are trying to do was new. For example, a lot of people in St. Lucia, including your humble servant, have not read completely from cover to cover the new Susie Dovey's team proposed constitution. My good friend Eldon Matrin, who passed away in December last year, or late November and was buried in December, was a member. Susie herself, Honorable Susie Dovey, has passed. And St. Lucians have not been privy to what was there. And this was the widest consultation we have ever had in St. Lucia, among St. Lucians in the diaspora, in London, in New York, in Canada, in St. Croix, across the Caribbean. This team of people consulted St. Lucians throughout St. Lucia. And I believe the constitution that they produced would be a portrayal of what people like myself, the Odlums, the Francis Michels, the John Odlums, the Mikey Pilgrims, wanted to see for St. Lucia. And I believe sincerely that I don't think Alan Shastey, whom I support, by the way, 100%, can take it on right now. There are too many things that needs to be done right now. So the constitution thing might get in the way of that. But I believe as early as next year, we should really try to see if we can get the Susie Dovey Constitution in Parliament, have the people of St. Lucia again discuss it and see what we can do. Because things like removing some power from the hands of the Prime Minister, we don't want the Prime Minister to become a little tin god or a dictator. This is not like England. In England, there are honorable men in both houses. And if something goes wrong, I remember clearly in the 60s, the Profumo scandal, when an MP was caught, hanky-panky in a prostitute, he resigned. That would never happen in St. Lucia or the Caribbean. So we have to write certain things down in the Constitution that Britain and other countries may not have to write. Length of
term.
Mm-hmm. Recall. If a person is elected, as far as I am concerned, and I hope we can put that in the Constitution, under Party A, and for some reason you fall out with Party A and you want to join Party B, it's fine. If you want to do that, nobody will stop you. But there must be fresh elections in that particular constituency that you are representing in Parliament if there is to be that crossing. I wouldn't even say crossing of the floor because it sounds like a curse word in St. Lucia. The other thing we wanted to do, and I hope it's in the new Constitution, even though we kept the 5-year term of office for the Prime Minister, we should have a definite date, month, and day. Well, not a definite date. A definite day and month for general elections. Okay. So people know that the Prime Minister don't have no bell to ring and how they call it in Creole, make people bell-a-lesh, pretend that you call in bell and you ring in bell. That is the little child's play at 40 years or even at independence itself. We don't need this kind of leadership. We need a constitution that says in September 20th of the month, 5 years after, there will be elections. Of course, there might be circumstances. If the whole country is destroyed by a hurricane and whatever, just before elections, you might actually give the Prime Minister and the government a little leg room, a little leeway to postpone the elections for 6 months or up to a year to get the country back working, etc., etc. Why have elections if the whole country is down, there's no electricity, no water, no this, no that, no that, because of a terrible earthquake, God forbid, terrible storm or hurricane, So we have to be reasonable in things like that.
Constitutional reform needed.
Constitutional reform is an absolute must, and I hope people like myself will be able to persuade the Prime Minister after he gets all his physical projects on the way, like the Viewfort Hospital, the Viewfort Airport, the whatever, racetrack, whatever he wants to do, or the government proposes to do, building of schools, health centers, etc. The next big item must be to get the people of St. Lucia to look and study the Constitution that Susie Dovey, I insist, not the present one, because what Susie Dovey, Eldon Matrin, and the others, in fact, I gave evidence before the commission, and a lot of St. Lucians who can read and write and who are knowledgeable. You don't have to be a lawyer to make a contribution to that committee, and a lot of people did. So I hope we can sit down as adults next year sometime and go over what Justice Susie Dovey and her team had produced and see if there's anything that needs tweaking, anything that needs updating. So all of us, as far as I'm concerned, the theme all in, we should be all in on a new constitution. That will please me very much.
What areas of development do you think we have done outstandingly well in?
I think we have produced some good, solid young people in terms of education opportunities and things. So I was trying to make a reference explaining somewhere yesterday evening at a friend of mine. In the Caribbean, St. Lucia used to be very backward in terms of everything. Even little Montserrat, a little 2x4 island, which can fit into St. Lucia about 6 times, was ahead of us. But Sir John, to his credit, and we have to say that whether we were Labour or not, we have to say that, he always took care of the kids and said it was important to build schools. That was a very important thing. Before that time, St. Lucians all started at zero. We are always starting at ground zero. But by the age of 18, after St. Lucians had done, those who went to secondary school had done their higher school certificates, they were on par with the average Caribbean. By the time they left 18 and went to university, they were doing better than the average university student. In postgraduate work, no one could catch up with St. Lucians again.
So, youth development. Can the SLP administration also be credited to some extent for that work?
I think so. I think, in fact, I think the SLP administration actually came with a lot of plans. There was some virus among them along the way. I don't know which one. I can't pinpoint a finger. Something must have gone wrong, because I'll tell you what happened. There was a twist when very early it looks like the positive things that they set out to do, instead of doing them, they began to put their own people, whether they could have done the job or not. That's the first mistake. And taken out people who were experienced, that they came to find there, who could help them. And the average civil servant, the average teacher, the average doctor, the average nurse would always support a government of St. Lucia elected by the people. There would be one or two foolish exceptions. I'm aware of that. But they lost their way when they started just tweaking, taking people black as white and changing. And also when they started what the average St. Lucian will call victimization, which was part of the tweaking, not recognizing people who had deserved to be in certain positions, and even in an honors list. Even in a simple thing like this time of year, St. Lucia's independence, the list of people, simple thing like justices of the peace, you know, you saw through what was happening. People who can hardly read and write became justices of the peace. That cannot be right. That cannot be right. And if the government before you had done it, people voted for you to correct it. So you cannot make the same mistake that the ones before you made, because we will never improve. If every time there's a change of government, you remove civil servants that you think are not for you or not supporting you, or teachers are transferred willy-nilly, nurses, or you vex with that one, that is childish. We are too old now at 40 to do that. And we should have done it to begin with, because I maintain, and I wrote last week, no, the week before, in an article on Philip Pierre, that in my humble opinion, the Labour Party, the St. Lucia Labour Party, has always produced a higher intellectual slate of candidates than the UWP. It goes back a long way. But you know what has gotten in the way? That little, how they call it, victimization thing, the cultural thing, and the bad-mindedness gets in the way of the intellect. So UWP succeed better because UWP is able to come with a little education, put themselves together, work together, and push the country forward. Okay. All the intellectuals in the Labour Party, for some reason, they cannot put either their hatred, their petty peeves, whatever you wish to call it. And that is something very few St. Lucians have written about or have said. But it's my duty to observe these things, and I've observed it. From my time, we always in the Labour Party, and I say we because I was part of the Labour Party, had very bright people. I'm not even talking qualifications, academic qualifications only. But Sir John was one guy with a lot of average persons, molded them together, and got them to work for a common cause. And that was a big difference.
Okay. You've commended the current UWP administration for the celebrations of independence and so on. What would you credit them for in terms of their work in the last few years, in terms of what they've been able to achieve for the country? Have you seen, what is your perception?
I think it's early to judge Alan Chasney, because I prefer to start from that, because don't forget, Stevenson King, who did a fantastic job continuing to hold the torch for Sir John. Basically, that's what Steve was there to do, okay? To continue Sir John's legacy and to continue the work Sir John had set for him. And even then, I think he had a full term, right? So I won't comment on Stevenson King, Honorable Stevenson King, so much, neither on Compton, because the work is there for people to see. What Sir John had started, Steve tried to finish. I don't want to comment on Dr. Kenny Anthony's Labour Party either. The person I want to comment on is Alan Chastanet, because Alan Chastanet brought something new. The thing he brought new, in my humble opinion, is empathy. There is a new feeling. When Sir John was annoyed with you, you knew. Because if he felt you were getting in the way, he would be puffed up and determined to fight and things so. I have not seen Alan in that mold, and I hope to God he never gets into the mold where he wants to fight people. Alan is more embracing, which is a very, very good quality to have, especially at this time. If you listen carefully to his independence address, that is, I'm talking about Alan Chastanet, Prime Minister, this was all bringing people together. He has tried to do it in the House of Assembly, even when people are calling names and playing as if they're still school children. One of the things he has described very clearly is the vision he has. Now, I am one of those persons who has been very critical, and I will repeat it here, that I feel to myself that he should have grabbed that nettle of St. Jude quicker. As far as I'm concerned, and I can't speak for Alan Chastanet or anybody else, if I was Prime Minister, by now somebody from St. Jude would have been before the courts. He may not have been in jail, but the way that money was spent, our taxpayers' money was spent in St. Jude, Prime Minister Alan Chastanet and I differ on that. I'm sure he's trying to do the best he can, building up St. Jude. But I believe that we should always work on separate, different platforms at one time when you're in politics. Somebody has to be made to pay for the nonsense that happened in St. Jude, for the money that was spent there recklessly. And unless an example is made in St. Lucia will not change. Some big boy, big papi, some businessman who is playing the fool, you know, somebody who is spending government's money recklessly and not accounting for it, they must be made to account. I don't care who you are. Maybe if I was Prime Minister, I might not be alive to speak that way. But that is a chance you take. If you're not prepared to sacrifice your life for your country, you shouldn't be in politics. You should not. And I believe Alan Chastanet is focused on where he wants to go. He's not worrying to anybody. He's not going to answer anybody, and I hope he sticks to that. You know, not every dog that barks you must say mash. Sometimes you have to let the dog bark because that's what dogs do. Not every jackass that bray you have to tell it stop braying. That's what jackasses do. You know, you have to give the animals a chance to live as animals do. But you do the work of a man and a prime minister because that's what you were elected and selected by your colleagues to do.
On that note, we're just going to take a quick break. Do stay tuned. We have more of the reality show coming up in just a moment.
This is The Reality Show on Calabash TV. This is our reality, Calabash TV.
We are continuing our conversation with Mr. Peter Josie, one of the surviving St. Lucian delegates to negotiate St. Lucia's independence from Britain. So just to backtrack on the whole idea of funds, and you're talking about, you know, responsible spending.
Right.
The Prime Minister, the conclusion of a review into managing the country's debt has resulted in we seeing the closure of the Marketing Board, Fish Marketing Corporation. What are your thoughts with these decisions being taken by the current administration?
The thing is, people, I've heard the opposition say the government is not a business, it can't operate like a business. That is not true. I mean, it's not a business where the businessman makes the profit and puts in his pocket in that sense only. Because if the government makes money, it's not Alan Chastanet's money or Stevenson King or Spider or any of the ministers who are going to benefit. It's the country as a whole. But let me say something. No country in the World Bank the IMF will not accept any country, I don't care how big or how small, coming to them crying for help and yet spending money or investing in something that is not going to work. Because it looks like the marketing board and the Fish Marketing Corporation, they look like political ventures that the taxpayers of St. Lucia are being made to keep alive. Look at the Fish Marketing Corporation. Started with good ideas. But it would not work. When the fishermen have a lot of catch, a big catch, and they can't sell, they would go and unload it or offload it at the Fish Marketing Corporation, like a middleman, who in turn will try to sell it at barely a profit, if at all, because there's a glut on the market. When there's no fish, the fisherman sells his fish and makes his money and forgets that there's a Fish Marketing Corporation. It cannot work that way. Basically, the same thing happens at the other board. The farmers, when there's a lot and they can't sell, they go and dump it on the marketing board. And the marketing board was set up to take it from them, to buy it from them. And of course, they start making noise, oh, but they're not buying from me. It cannot work that way. You have to sell to them all the time and let them be your middleman. And at the end of the day, when they make some profit, they will divide the profit.
Is that your alternative solution, or are you in support of?
It has not worked. So I'm not sure what the alternative will be, what the government is planning. I will not want to suggest anything now. But it took a lot of guts. And that is where you have to appreciate Alan Chasney's determination to make things work. One thing you can tell, one way you can tell when a prime minister or government is serious is when they are prepared to take unpopular decisions. And that's fine too. The people have put you there to make this thing work. If the marketing board and the Fish Marketing Corporation keep bleeding out money, losing money every year, how can any decent government or any decent person, any person who thinks properly, because it is not their personal money, it's not the Prime Minister's money or his minister's money, it's our money as citizens. It's our taxes that are going down the hole. Taxes that could be used to build a better road, a better school, to repair school buildings, to repair hospitals and health centers, to help poor people buy medicines if it comes to that. That is what the alternative for a scarce resource as money is so plentiful. You don't know where to begin. There are a lot of poor people in St. Lucia still who cannot afford to buy medicine. Why should the taxpayers' money, be going into the marketing board, into the Fish Marketing Corporation, like, in a hole that will never be filled, when there are poor people who can't send their children to school sometimes, who can be helped with that same money? Because the money is limited. There's only so much you can do because of the limited amount of money that you have. Even the mighty America has its limitations. There's no country that is totally, free with so much money that they can do everything they want every year for all their people.
While on the subject of the Fish Marketing Corporation and the marketing board, you're the former agriculture minister.
Yeah.
What have been your observations in the last few years with regard to the status of the industry and where we can take it? A lot of persons have concerns. Where is agriculture headed? How can it be boosted? And I know you have posited a lot of suggestions on where it can go. What are your observations now?
The first thing I say, and I don't mean to be critical of Minister Ezekiel, is that perhaps we need to hear some more from the minister himself. Because you notice Mr. Fede, the Minister of Tourism, the Prime Minister himself, their first love, even though he's Prime Minister, it's clear that Alan Chasney's first love is the tourism industry. He loves finance and business, but he loves tourism. Minister Dominic Fede has been in the tourism industry for a long time. And these two gentlemen, when they speak, they often mention tourism. How many visitors, how many ships, how many aircraft, load factor, this and that. Always giving some information. All I would like to see my brother Ezekiel Joseph do, not to necessarily compete with them, but to have his mouthpiece, who is as efficient as these two, to talk about agriculture. Because our bananas, I'm hoping that bananas can make a recovery of maybe up to 60,000 tons a year. 70,000 would be beautiful. We started well because at one time we thought Martinique was going to be helpful. But the competition is severe. And Europe and England really, England maybe now with a push and Brexit, England needs the Commonwealth again. Perhaps there might be some little opening for us in England with not as much competition. And the British housewife, I have traveled up there, I've seen our bananas. There was a time we had pictures on the plastic covering of the different farmers. And the people in the supermarket, oh, these are the guys who say, yes. And you become moved emotionally, and they would support you. The British housewife would actually buy from the Windward Islands. And we need to do this kind of special marketing. And more than that, I was on a, where was I? I was on a transit going to Viewfort the other day with some friends. Okay? It was a private thing. And we were speaking about bananas. And one fella suggested, if we ever go back to putting the kind of trash that I have personally seen, when I used to sell bananas at the Viewfort docks, I have seen boxes with total trash in it, you know. Little bananas that you wouldn't feed to pigs. Some of our farmers were putting in boxes. And we have to say that, whether we're in government or not. Unless we stop it, we are going to spoil the trade for every decent, law-abiding, productive farmer. That has been part of our problem. You open a market for dashing, you get some dashing being sold in England, they go and put all kind of, you know what they call malenga, all the thing that looks like dashing but bitter like hell and scratches, they put some nonsense in it. You try to develop ginger, they find a family of the ginger that is not wanted, they put in it. Some of them even put stones to make up weight in it. You cannot do that. And if you have to develop agriculture further, I think there must be more strict regiment of rules. Don't be afraid to tell the farmers when they're wrong and to hold them before the courts. Because the farmers are not stupid. And I hate to hear when governments say Mali way, Mali way, Mali way, as if the Mali way have no brains. The other thing we are doing, and I think we have to do it and push very hard, is cocoa. Cocoa is making a strong comeback. I think in the Soufrière area, we always had a lot of cocoa, good soils. And one of the things cocoa does, the cocoa crop, the root system binds the soil better than bananas could ever do. So it's very good for the hillsides to save our soils from being eroded to the rivers, ending up browning the seacoast, etc., etc. So cocoa is an ideal crop to go back in. And we need big trees to protect the cocoa because cocoa needs a lot of shelter, etc., etc. So we need to demarcate our island again. Calix George and I, many, many years ago, had developed an island-wide map of agriculture and different development areas in St. Lucia. The Ministry of Agriculture must have at least a couple talented guys who can take a map of St. Lucia today, map out where cocoa should be developed, one or two other crops, and follow that to the letter. One person in charge. You don't need more than one person on a good Land Rover, you know, making the rounds, see that the right cocoa is being planted, the people are at work, the marketing is in place, and whatever other crops you may choose, vegetables for the hotels.
Yes, I see we're sneaking into the whole idea of land reform.
The whole idea of land reform, you know, and don't let people in the valley. There's a guy in Cul-de-Sac Valley there. When you turn from Castries down the back of the Mon, you turn going in the valley, turn left. You drive half a mile, and there's an eyesore on the right-hand side of the road. You know, it's like having. Derek Walcott had referred to the Pitons as the breast of St. Lucia, and when you go and interfere that, you're actually trying to erode the beauty of St. Lucia. As far as I'm concerned, the valley is where our food baskets are. And there should not be any kind of development with garages and that in the valleys. Go on the hillsides, you know, do the hillsides properly and build your houses, your garages, or whatever there, and leave the flat land, you know, which is arable, which can be cultivated by agricultural implements.
Let's go back 40 years ago. Can you give us a snapshot of the negotiation sitting in Britain? What were the major expectations of both the government and the opposition at that time? And how do you think we have melded and merged and come to be satisfied with that outcome? Or are you even?
First, the British government always had their representatives in the Caribbean and in St. Lucia. So they always knew what was going on. That's the first point. Mr. Lucia and the Labour Party were in communications with London all the time. Mm-hmm. We had prepared a white paper. They knew what our demands were. The first one was a political one, and I would be the first to admit it. Do it right, let the people decide. It may seem like a political jargon at the time. But if we had done it right, the constitution that we're still waiting to develop from Susie Dovey would have been in place already. But the one thing is there was pressure from the United Nations Group of 24
yes,
to give countries independence. It was time. The British government were amenable to that because they could no longer suck our oranges dry. They could no longer suck our sugarcane dry. They were not making money from us anymore. So it was time to let us go. That is the brutality of colonialism. Whether we want to, you know, soft pedal it and make excuses for Britain, we're looking for friends everywhere, but the reality is that we were of no use to England anymore. The strategic use was moved from England to America because America now became kind of an overall lord of the Western Hemisphere. So, except for Cuba, and when the Russians were trying to put their missiles in Cuba, it almost caused a nuclear conflagration in this part of the world. So we have really no use except if Mr. Putin were to say, okay, I'm in love with St. Lucia, I love St. Lucia, I'm going to give a couple of trillions of dollars, but I want to build an air base, expand Viewport, make it a military base for Russia. That is a card we can play, but you know what? America will start pouring money. They might even open an American base here before. So you see, unless you have forces contending for you, like a young woman having different suitors who want to marry her, there's no competition. So you might end up with somebody you don't really like, but you want to get married, you marry anyway. You see the point I'm making? And I don't mean any insult to the young woman watching this program, okay? But the reality is, at the time, Britain wanted to get rid of St. Lucia. The second point, which I think a lot of people don't seem to understand, Britain, that is, wanted to give Sir John the prime ministership. He had served well. He was a friend of Britain. He had studied in England. Sir John was, to be charitable and to put it the best way I can, he was actually a continuation of the plantocracy which Britain had established. He had a lukule wayayai, and you know what that means. Very fair skin, wavy hair. That is after the white rule. There was a time in St. Lucia as a little boy, and I'm old enough to know that, to remember that. You couldn't get a job in any bank, you know, with my complexion or yours or any St. Lucian who was darker than maybe Sir John. The first St. Lucian I remember who got a job and was not white might have been Morpers, Mitchell, and then Hollis, Bristol, and that lot. So you see, they went from white to fair skin, then they start taking light brown, until they got to the darker colors. And we in the St. Lucia Forum at the time called us the Black Power Group, and I'm very proud to have been called that, radical black. I would be that again all my life if I can. And if I die not being a radical, I don't think St. Peter or Jesus Christ or whoever is up there guarding the gates should welcome me as anything other than the Peter Josie that God had created me to be. That's what I want to be.
But despite the preference that you speak of for Sir John, did the opposition, you did find some consolation in the mandatory election to be called?
Yeah, sure. Because that was the compromise the British arrived at. That's the compromise. They would give Sir John, and 6 months after there'd be elections. But we are still not happy, because I was adamant when the British government proposed to give us a handshake of £50,000. I told Alan he should not accept it. If Sir John wants, let him accept it and do what he wants with it. And I said it loud enough at the table for the minister and his entourage and his advisors to hear. I said, no. After 100 years of colonialism, slavery before that, all of what you have taken from us, you gain us £50,000. That is money you'd make from us in 1 year. You're giving it to us for all of our independence. 40 years later, where's that £50,000? What can we say? Okay, we build this house or this building or this office. You know, we don't need that. Keep it. Maybe one day when we're ready, we'll negotiate.
This is our reality, Calabash TV. This is happening. This is our reality. This is Calabash TV.
We are continuing our conversation with Mr. Peter Josie, one of the surviving St. Lucian delegates, to negotiate St. Lucia's independence from Britain. So you have a new book out, and it's called Reparations Conference.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that book? I'm just coming off of what you were just speaking about.
Well, to begin with, I spend a lot of time writing because I feel that I have always felt that I'm a special person. Not special in a swell-headed kind of way, but I've always felt things in my mind like an artist. My father was that kind of person. He created things with his hands. So in my mind, I've always been a creative person. And I remember Brother Ignatius always used to say, if we read, Ignatius Fly at St. Mary's College, anybody who reads and learns to read and reads a lot, one day the inspiration will come into you, will get into you, and you will write. If you read a lot, you will write. Because you will see things, and that happens to me a lot. From the time I was small, you see things that are said by a writer, and you say, my God, I wish I could have said that. Or how could I say this better than this guy, or in my way, but delivering the same message. So I spend a lot of time writing, and that's my third book, actually. Mm-hmm. The first one is Shattered Dreams. The second one is called The Shopping List. And Reparations Conference really is an anticipation. It's all in my mind, eh? It's all from the imagination. A guy ready to say, man, you put hell on this young person there, you made them... I said, me? I did. But you said that the person was there. And I said, this is all from my mind. That I was never at any place where there was actually... That was from your mind? I said, yes, I just wrote it. I imagine what might happen if a reparations conference is called in an island in the Caribbean, like St. Lucia. I don't mention any island. So that is what it's about, the chairperson, and invited certain persons to attend at the head table and to deliver papers. One was a trade unionist. One was a Rasta representing the Rastafarian Brethren. One was a schoolgirl representing the collective thing. One was a school teacher, and the other one I've even forgotten was representing the general population. Mm-hmm. And the different perspectives are coming from that. I never set out to put a case for reparations. I let it come out of the mouths of those who were speaking. And at the end of it, I gave what Professor Beckles and UWI and his colleagues, the 10-point thing that they had arrived at, mm-hmm. I put it in it. I make one or two references to Sir Arthur Lewis, mm-hmm. because a lot of people remember that Sir Arthur said that the cure for poverty is education. Not money. Many people, I shouldn't say many people, some people don't seem to remember that he also said that if Britain or Europe was to pay back to the Caribbean all of the monies that they should pay them in labor, that's during slavery, he didn't say it that way, the Caribbean would be a developed country. And I believe that. You see, so there are different ways of saying it. Maybe I don't say it smoothly enough, and I do it deliberately, because sometimes, you know, the word qui, Peter Kadibaila qui, he's saying the thing raw. Sometimes it needs to be said raw for the kind of audience you have. When you have a nice, smooth audience that have the highfalutin education and they know the Oxford English Dictionary and their language, then you speak the language and smooth over it nicely. So it goes down well, like a nice soup. You know what I'm saying? But when you have an audience speaking to that does not understand that refined language, it is a waste of time to pretend that they do. And you must say it, you know, just like some people say the joke sounds sweeter in Creole. That is what I'm talking about. That is what I'm talking about.
On the subject of reparations and so many other considerations, what did independence mean to you then? I'm sure the Black Power movement had some, you know, some thought to what the region was owed from the colonialist days, you know. What did it mean to you then, independence, coming away from Mother Britain?
It was a joyous moment for St. Lucia, for me as a St. Lucian, but there was always a tinge of sadness. And the tinge of sadness had nothing to do with Sir John or anybody in St. Lucia. It was the fact that the Caribbean experiment in the Federation had failed. Because I have traveled the Caribbean. There are only 2 islands in the Caribbean I have never set foot on, 2 English-speaking islands. That is Anguilla and Montserrat. And I have friends in both places. You know, I've been to Haiti, I've been to Cuba, I've been to Martinique and all the different places and countries from Guyana right up to Belize. And everywhere I go, I see the same people. I see traces of the different tribes. You know, the hairline, the receding hair in men, the way they grow their beard, where, you know, the hair begins to get white if they're old enough. Youngsters, the way they speak. All black people don't have big nostrils. Some of them have nose like white people. All of these things I've noticed, and I say, but these people could be related to that and that people from Dominica. Or this one from St. Vincent could be related from that one in Grenada or St. Lucia. And the races, the Indians, you could see where they have intermingled. The old Carib, as my mother's family were, Carib, you could see the high cheekbone in them still, in the older ones. So when I look at the Caribbean, earlier this year, I was in Antigua. I didn't have a lot of time to look around. But even within the conference where I was, the Antiguans, it's the same people. And so it has always troubled me a little that we are not one, that we still need different passports, that people still ask you, how long are you going to stay, etc. It really does trouble me. It hurts because I'm seeing when we're colonies of Britain, Britain is how many miles? 4,000 miles away or 3? We were controlled by a little country which is, Guyana is bigger than England. And all of us behave so well. Do we still need a white man to bring us together? Sometimes I ask myself these questions, and I don't like to say that in public or even on television, but it's a thought that occurs to me occasionally, and I want your viewers to know that I think of these things, not every day, but I think of these things. Whether we still need an external force, whether we still need a white massa to tell us the best thing to do is to unite first among ourselves as St. Lucians, and then as much as possible with the other Caribbean islands. And that is why I was so happy when I heard that this independence committee had brought together the Dominican cadets. I was so happy to see that. Vincentians are always there on their motorcycles and things, so the Barbadians came with their cars, and I heard the Jamaicans were invited. And the more people we can invite for independence from the Caribbean, the better. Because one of these days, our grandchildren, if not our children, will get the idea, say, you know what? What is the point in this civilian blue? Why don't we have all of the blues mixed together and all the reds and things, so, and have a flag that truly represents the Caribbean, you know, that is ours. And so some of us must keep dreaming. It might never happen in my lifetime, but we must keep dreaming.
Okay, we're kind of running out of time, but any final words on the subject of independence and the fact that we've reached this milestone of 40 years and you've lived to see it, even from the inception, discussions, negotiations for this momentous occasion for St. Lucia. Any final words?
There's one thing I haven't said sufficiently, and I want to say it again. I want to take the opportunity to say it, and that is, I want to thank God for the opportunity that He has given me of this lifetime to see 40 years. And I pray that He can spare my life for another 10 years, that I see 50 years of independence. And I know that there will be St. Lucians who are not happy for one reason or the other. And I will say to them what the Prime Minister said. Every day cannot be a happy day in your life. Every day cannot be a sunshiny day. Neither can every day be a rainy day. It is time we begin to grow up at 40, put our little differences aside, and let us come together as one people. The time will come when we'll be quietly lining up and change our government. And every government that is elected, the opposition must learn to respect the views of the people of St. Lucia. And as long as I'm alive, that is something I will continue to say, because the people are the ones with the power. The people are the ones that put us there in office, and they are the ones who must take us out if we are not performing to their liking and to their benefit.
Any words on your legacy?
Well, I'll tell you what, that's why I write. Right now, I'm on the 8th chapter. Maybe I've left the 8th chapter on the 9th. I'm going to write 40 chapters. I wrote 40 chapters in the first book, Shattered Dreams. And now the secret is out. That 40 chapters were not chosen as a joke or by fluke, as I said in an article. It is because in the Christian faith, 40 is so important. It was 40 years in the wilderness after the children of Israel reached the promised land. 40 years after Jesus died, Jerusalem was destroyed. 40 years and 40 days and 40 nights, Noah on the sea, until there was dry land. So you look at 40, and there are a lot of other examples which escape me now. I'm not a preacher or born again anything, but I believe I've been to Jerusalem. I believe I've walked and seen the places where Jesus walked. I've been to the River Jordan. I saw where He was baptized. So I may not know who God is, but Jesus came to talk to us about God and to say He came with the power of God to forgive our sins and to make us better people. And I believe that.
And on that note, on that spiritual note, Mr. Josie, we end our interview with one of the surviving St. Lucian delegates to negotiate St. Lucia's independence from Britain. Thank you so much, Mr. Josie, for speaking to us. This has been another installment of the reality show on CTV. Do stay tuned for more of our programming. I'm Jessy Leonce signing out for now.
This is The Reality Show.